The airport at night looked like a city within a city, glass gleaming under rows of white lights, announcements blooming and fading across the air like waves. Yuna tightened her grip on the thin paper of her boarding pass and kept walking. The floor seemed to mirror her. Polished, exhausted, determined to keep going anyway. She had finished another night shift and her bones felt hollow, but her mind would not quiet. A list of bills, a voicemail from the clinic, the word overdue stamped against the inside of her skull. She pressed a folded envelope deeper into her coat pocket as if hiding it could erase the numbers. Gates split like forks in a road. She followed the sign, the one with the arrow that matched the one on her pass, or so she thought, and found herself in a corridor more silent than the rest. Carpet soft, people fewer, perfume sharper. A smiling attendant glanced at her boarding pass and, with hands moving faster than questions, gestured her forward. Yuna blinked, hesitated, then stepped through. Maybe the airline had a new process. Maybe she had finally caught a small stroke of luck. The doors parted on a lounge she had only seen in glossy advertisements. Muted gold lamps, leather chairs, a pianist touching soft notes into the air like falling petals. She tucked a stray hair behind her ear and tried to look as if she belonged. A woman in a dark suit scanned her pass and nodded as if everything was ordinary. Ordinary. Yuna kept repeating that word to her heart. She moved toward the window and watched a private jet idle on the tarmac, its body glowing under the floodlights like something from another world. A staff member approached with a practiced smile. "We're boarding now, miss." Felt rude to explain the whole confusion. A stranger would not care about her long shifts, her father's prescriptions, her habit of apologizing for existing. She followed, weightless and heavy at once, shoes quiet on the carpet. The night air outside carried that metallic chill only airports possess, the promise of departures and the ache of returns. She climbed the steps and paused at the top, palm damp against the railing. The cabin scent was warm cedar and something clean like new paper. A hush lay over it as if voices were not allowed to disturb the expensive quiet. "Who are you?" The voice slid through the silence and fixed her in place. A man sat facing the aisle, phone laid flat on the table, sleeves rolled to the forearm with the kind of care that made casual look deliberate. He wasn't handsome the way billboards are handsome. He was handsome the way cliffs are handsome. Edges that dared the sea to come closer. His eyes traveled over her in a second that felt longer than it was. Shoes worn, coat a size too big, hair gathered without time for neatness, the tremor she tried to hide in her fingers. "I'm sorry," she said, and the word broke in the middle like a thin stick. This isn't my." The door sealed with the solid sigh of airtight certainty. The sense of motion beneath her feet began, slow and inevitable, like a heartbeat deciding not to stop. Yuna's breath caught. The man stood in one fluid line, and in the small tilt of the cabin she stumbled. He crossed the space and caught her by the shoulders. Not rough, not gentle either. Something in between that said he was used to preventing accidents before they started. Up close, she could see a tiredness in him that no money could fix. "Sit," he said, not unkindly, just used to being obeyed. He guided her into the nearest seat. "Before you fall again." "I don't belong here," she managed. "I was supposed to be at gate 32B. Economy. Window seat if I got lucky." She tried to smile at her own joke and failed. "This is not gate 32B. No humor." He studied her boarding pass. The logo wasn't his. He lifted a brow, then glanced toward the cockpit. "We've already pushed back. I'll go back. I can walk. It's fine." It isn't." He said it like a fact of weather, like gravity. "You can't disembark now." Her hands found each other and locked, knuckles white. Fear and embarrassment poured heat under her skin. "I'm sorry." His phone vibrated against the table with an insect hum. Messages lit the screen in a neat column, each one a demand in polite clothing. He silenced it without looking and finally said, "What's your name?" "Yuna." "Jiho." He didn't offer a hand. He didn't need to. His name carried its own weight. The jet eased forward across the night and she felt the surreal sensation of being carried by a decision that wasn't hers. Jiho sat, his gaze a calm blade. How did you end up in a private lounge with a commercial boarding pass? I followed a sign. The words were small. Someone waved me in. I don't know. It was quiet and I just kept moving. He watched her for a beat that lengthened. You look like someone who keeps moving even when you shouldn't. The cabin attendant appeared with 2 glasses of water. Efficient, discreet, unbothered by mystery passengers because mystery was probably a line in her job description. Yuna wrapped cold around her palms and tried to anchor herself to the ordinary sensation of drinking. Jiho angled his body toward her, and the cabin lights traced a pale line along his jaw. I need a favor, he said, and it did not sound like a question. Tonight, maybe for the next few days. She blinked. From me. The universe seems to have delivered you, he said. I don't ignore deliveries. I think the universe made a mistake. He almost smiled and then didn't. It often does. I make use of them. The jet paused, turned, and power built into a low roar. Yuna felt it in her ribs. She pressed a palm to the envelope inside her coat as if to keep the numbers from shaking free. Jiho's eyes caught the gesture and lingered a second on the pocket, then returned to her face. I'm supposed to stand beside someone tomorrow, he said. At a table in a room full of men who only see numbers and power. They want me to belong to a plan my father signed with his last name. I need that plan to fail. I don't understand. They expect a fiancé, he said. They expect me to announce a merger of families and assets and a future I refuse to live. If I show up with someone else, someone they can't control, and make it official enough to buy time, I can move 3 pieces they won't see. Then I can walk away with my company intact. She stared. The words made a map and she couldn't follow it. Official. A contract, he said. Short, clear. Boundaries, compensation, timing. No deception beyond performance. No cost to your life beyond appearances. Enough money to turn whatever is in your pocket into air. Her fingers curled tighter around the envelope, paper crushing soundlessly. You don't know what's in my pocket. I know exactly what debt looks like on someone's face. He held her gaze. I grew up surrounded by people who owed. They have a particular way of counting seconds. The runway lights began to slide faster. The world beyond the oval window blurred into streaks of white and black. Yuna's chest rose and fell in a rhythm she used to check on patients when panic climbed their throats. You want me to be your... For a moment, he said. For the length of time it takes to change tomorrow into something else. You would be safe. You would be compensated. And after, the cabin tilted backward as the jet leaped into the sky. Her stomach dipped. She swallowed. You go back to your world and I go back to mine. That is the idea. She looked at her hands, small against the leather armrest. She had never been good at saying yes to things that frightened her. She had never been good at saying no to things that could save someone she loved. Her father's face passed through her mind with the soft grayness of hospital light. The color drained from the numbers in her pocket and returned as possibility. She hated herself for thinking of money while a stranger asked her to perform a life. She hated herself for how easy it would be to accept. Why me? She asked anyway, a last defense. He studied her as if the answer might be written somewhere on her coat. Because you were not supposed to be here and you came anyway. Because you didn't scream when you realized the door was closed. Because you look at me like I'm a person and not a calculation. He paused. Because sometimes a mistake arrives exactly on time. Her laugh was small and broke again, but it steadied. You sound like someone who thinks he controls the sky. I don't, he said. I only read the weather, and I choose when to fly. Silence folded around them, the kind that feels like the moment before a coin lands. The cabin lights dimmed to a warm low amber. Far below, the city drew its constellations in glass and steel. Yuna thought about the rules she had written for herself to survive. Do not ask for more, do not take up space, do not believe in dramatic changes. She uncurled her fingers from the envelope and let it rest against her knee. If I say yes, she said quietly, can I keep parts of my life that are mine? My work, my name, my quiet. Yes. And I don't have to pretend beyond what is necessary. No. And when this ends, it ends. Yes. He held her with his eyes, not trapping, not pleading, just holding. But while it lasts, I will not let anyone hurt you. She nodded, the motion slight but real. And with that tilt the line of her life slipped onto a new track. He slid a folder from a drawer and placed it on the table between them. Printed pages, stark and neat. He turned the pen so it faced her and waited without tapping it, without rushing her. She let her eyes move over words she had never expected to see in sentences that involved her. The clauses treated her like a person rather than a purchase. She swallowed gratitude and suspicion together and laid them side by side. Yuna, he said, naming her like a vow instead of a label. You're allowed to think. You're allowed to say no. She returned the pen to the table. I'm allowed to say yes too. His mouth softened in something almost like relief. You are. Her signature looked foreign and familiar at once. She watched the ink dry and felt nothing change and everything rearrange. The cabin found a quiet groove in the sky. The engines hummed like an enormous, patient animal. His phone lit again, a stack of alerts rising. He ignored them until one line locked his expression in place. He tapped, and the air between them shifted, cooler. What is it? She asked, hearing the shift without reading the words. He angled the screen just enough for her to see. A news banner glared in red across a thumbnail photo of a jet beneath floodlights. The headline marched beneath it in clean, merciless type. Billionaire heir spotted on private jet with mystery woman ahead of board announcement. Yuna's pulse ticked into her throat. Somewhere far below, the city's lights went on blinking. Ships traced slow lines in black water. Cabs crawled like ants toward bars that would close too late. Up here, the air felt thinner. Jiho exhaled through his nose and set the phone down as if placing a stone. Looks like our contract just started working, he said. Outside, the sky was dark and unbothered. Inside, the world tilted a fraction, just enough to suggest turbulence, just enough to make everything already signed feel suddenly weightless. The hum of the engines settled into a steady lullaby, but the quiet inside Yuna felt wired and bright, like a corridor lit by too many fluorescent bulbs. She set the pen down and the contract looked smaller than the weight it carried. Jiho's gaze returned to her face, checking. Not for regret exactly, but for fractures. You can still change your mind, he said. I won't. The answer surprised them both with how easily it came. I don't like running. A small nod, a private approval. He lifted a carafe. Tea, please. The cup warmed her palms. The steam curled soft and invisible. They sat like that for a moment, two strangers whose lives had been threaded by a line neither of them could see coming. What made you become a nurse? He asked, as if this were an ordinary first conversation at an ordinary altitude. People need someone to hold the hand that everyone else is too busy to hold. She tilted her head, thinking, I like being that person. He absorbed it, and something in his shoulders loosened as if a knot had been tricked into letting go. My father held no hands, he said. He held ledgers. Did he ever put them down? Not even when he said good night. His mouth quirked. He thought love was overvaluation. I think love is the only thing that gets undervalued, she said softly. They drifted into a comfortable silence that felt borrowed from another life, the one where they had met in a cafe at a normal hour, where his suit was just fabric and not armor, where her hands were not always counting costs. Bass thumped faintly as the jet passed through a pocket of rough air. The cup wobbled. Yuna reached instinctively, her fingers brushing his. The heat that jumped between their skins startled them. They both pretended it didn't. He checked the time. We land in 48 minutes. And then I use the time the contract buys us. To do what? Block a vote. Split a rumor. Move a man who thinks he moves everyone else. He took a breath. And I protect you. You don't have to say that. I know. He looked at her fully. I want to. Her pulse knocked against her throat, quick as a sparrow. She set the cup down and pressed two fingers to the inside of her wrist. A nurse's habit she didn't think about until his eyes dipped to watch. You're tacky, he murmured, dry as a chart note. Blame the altitude. She tried to smile. Or the headline. The phone between them lit again. Another alert. A cascade of mentions. The quiet violence of public attention. He turned it face down. Ignore it. That's not how the world works for you, he considered. Then let's make a smaller world for the next hour. Just this cabin. Just what you want to know. Everything, she said, surprising herself. What scares you? What you want? What you'll regret at 80? The corner of his mouth lifted. The list is long. We have 47 minutes. He told her about a house that always smelled like ink and citrus, about a boy who learned to price affection by how quickly it was delivered, about a scholarship he took against his father's advice and a woman he almost married because the contract looked clean. He spoke plainly, without decoration. It was the style of a man used to lying by omission but too tired to do it now. She listened like she breathed, with her whole self. When he finished, Yuna realized her hands had unclenched. She turned the conversation back with gentle questions that did not pry. In return, he learned about the father who whistled off-key while watering plants, the thrifted coats and the late buses, the way she could fall asleep standing up because the ward never stopped calling. He learned her laugh was small but sturdy, like a bridge that didn't look like it could carry trucks but did. Another dip, sharper. The overhead light flickered. The attendant's voice came smooth and calm over the speaker. A human hand on the shoulder of an anxious sky. Yuna exhaled. You okay? He asked. Check my pulse, she teased, and held out her wrist. He took it. The span of his fingers made her feel smaller than she was and safer than she expected. A paradox she filed away for later. His touch was clinical and careful, and then it wasn't just a human touch, present and warm. 98, he said. You're braver than most people I know. I'm only sitting still, she said. Brave would be standing up in your world and telling them no. Watch me, he said simply. The attendant reappeared with a folder, media briefings, the skeleton of a statement, the places where a story could be underlined. Jiho flipped through, efficient. We say as little as possible. We let them write their own speculation while we write our own outcome. What does my part look like? Yuna asked. Simple, he said. Stand at my side. Nod if you want. Don't if you don't. If anyone gets closer than you like, I step in. If you want to leave, we leave. What if I freeze? I'll thaw you. His face didn't change when he said it, but his voice softened, and the promise landed between them like a blanket. She studied him. Why do I feel like you've been cold for a long time? Climate control issues, he said. A beat. Until tonight. The engines began their long, slow descent. The city returned to meet them, a spread of glitter shaken across black velvet. As altitude fell, the world sharpened back into columns and headlines. His phone vibrated with a new tone, a secure one. He glanced, then looked to her. They're waiting at the VIP concourse. Cameras, board members, a family friend I'd rather not greet. Do I need to be afraid of her? Jiho said. And no, but you will dislike everything he represents. That makes two of us. Seatbelts clicked. The cabin shifted into landing posture. For a brief, beautiful second, the pressure in Yuna's ears drowned out everything else, and she felt free of the weight of expectation. Then wheels kissed runway and the spell broke. The lights brightened. The world knocked on the door. The jet rolled to a stop inside the private apron. The door opened with a hiss of returning air. Two staff members stepped in with the reverence of those entering a chapel. Behind them waited a slice of night busy with footsteps, radios, umbrellas even without rain. The attendant glanced at Yuna, and for the first time there was curiosity in the professional mask, maybe a little admiration too. Ready? Jiho asked. No, Yuna said, but I will be if you walk first. He did. He stepped into the flash-pop twilight and the noise rose like surf. Cameras turned as if on hinges. Men in suits broke formation, some with smiles too white, some with eyes too quick. Yuna followed, spine-tall, breath-counted, 4 in, 4 out, like she taught patients before procedures. Questions threw themselves into the air and tried to land on their faces. Names, rumors, numbers. She heard the word fiancé, heard a last name she did not own, heard the phrase merger of equals and wanted to laugh at the lie of it all. A woman with a microphone found Yuna's eyes and hurled something slower, heavier, meant to bruise. Are you his wife? Yuna felt the world tilt, not like turbulence, more like a decision. She opened her mouth and found no words that wouldn't break her open. Before the silence could crack into 1,000 interpretations, Jiho's hand found hers. He didn't squeeze. He simply acknowledged that the touch was theirs, not the camera's. She is with me, he said, voice steady enough to quiet a hanger. That is all you need tonight. Is that a yes? Someone shouted. It is a promise, he said, and the air shifted. They moved as a unit toward the interior corridor, a space blessedly without lenses. The door shut and sound dropped like a curtain. Yuna let out the breath she had been hoarding. For a second, she wanted to be anywhere else. A bus seat, a tiny kitchen, a ward with familiar beeps. Then Jiho turned to her and she understood why she had chosen sky over ground. You did well, he said. I didn't do anything. You stood, he said. Sometimes that's the hardest part. A figure peeled away from the wall. A man whose suit cost as much as a car and whose smile belonged on a brochure for things that ruin you slowly. Jiho, he said, opening his arms as if the night were a gift he had bought. And guessed. What a surprise. Hello, uncle, Jiho said, and the word tasted like steel. We won't keep you. Oh, but you will. The uncle's gaze slid to Yuna like a weather report that predicted storms. The board is restless. They require clarity. They'll get results, Jiho said. They can live without clarity. Investors do not love fog. A smile that didn't touch eyes. And the press adores it. Who is she? Someone not for you, Jiho said. His tone never lifted, never broke. We'll see you at the meeting. The uncle's eyes hardened by 1 degree. We expect you to honor your father's arrangement. My father is past honoring, Jiho said. I am not. A beat. The uncle stepped aside with the elegance of a sword, leaving a throat uncut. For now. Tomorrow, then. They walked. Corridor after corridor. The world narrowed until it was just their footsteps. Yuna's knees remembered how to be knees. She realized she was still holding his hand and almost let go. But he did it first, gently, as if returning it the way you return a borrowed item you want to keep. I thought I might fail that, she said, trying to find lightness. You didn't. He studied her face again like a map he'd started to memorize. But if you need to leave, I will arrange it. Tonight. Now. She pictured a taxi cutting through midnight rain. A door she could close and lock and lean against until her heartbeat slowed. She pictured his face alone among people who would gladly decide his life for him. She surprised herself again. I'm not leaving. He nodded once, and relief moved through him so quietly she would have missed it if she hadn't been watching. The car waited beyond another door. The driver opened it and the night exhaled cool across their faces. Just before he ducked into the back seat, Jiho's phone chimed with a sound she hadn't heard before. A tone like a scalpel finding a tray. He read. The muscle in his jaw hardened. What now? Yuna asked. They brought the vote forward, he said. 8 hours. Can we make it? He looked at her hand as if the answer were there, then up at her eyes. Only if we stop being two people. What does that mean? It means we stop pretending it's only ink. He tipped his head to the rainless sky. Tomorrow we walk in as if the contract is a marriage. As if. He held the door for her. Or as. She tasted the words, felt the shape of them in her mouth. Fear pricked. Courage warmed. Somewhere inside, a small, stubborn part of her that had never been asked to choose anything important lifted its face to the future. Then teach me how to stand beside you, she said and climbed in. The door shut. The city slid by in sheets of light. And somewhere, in a room full of men who only saw numbers, someone refreshed a page and frowned at a vote they thought would be easy. The car slid through a drowsy city, towers blinking like sleepless eyes. Yuna watched her reflection in the window and almost didn't recognize the steadiness there. Jiho's phone chimed with short, important sounds. He ignored most of them and answered only what moved the next 12 hours closer to possible. When the car eased into the underground entrance of his building, night folded around them like a curtain. Inside, the apartment felt more like a private museum than a home. Quiet, deliberate, expensive. Shelves of books that looked read but never reread. A piano whose lid reflected the ceiling like black water. Yuna touched nothing. She stood in the doorway and breathed. A wardrobe appeared because someone had anticipated a guest. A simple dress, soft and formal. The kind of fabric that falls like a decision already made. Beside it, a small box with shoes in her size. She looked at Jiho. He offered an apology and a practicality in one tilted smile. I called ahead, in case you stayed. I stayed, she said, and held his gaze until the facts settled. They rehearsed without calling it rehearsal. He poured coffee and they sat at the long table with the city as a backdrop. He outlined the order. Driver, private entrance, boardroom, a short corridor of cameras. She would stand at his left, half a step behind or beside as she preferred. If anyone asked questions too directly, he would answer. If anyone asked her whether she loved him, she was allowed to say nothing. Silence could be truth. Silence could be mercy. He spoke in clean, unornamented lines. She interrupted with human ones. What if your uncle walks toward me? What if you need a breath? What if all of them talk at once? He answered each like a pilot reading weather. Sometime between 2 cups and 3 sets of strategies, the rain began. It came quietly at first, a patient, thorough sound against glass. Yuna stood near the window and let it fill her ears until the rest receded. She closed her eyes and counted her heartbeat the way she had taught him at altitude. When she opened them, he was beside her, not too close. The city blurred. The rain wrote its slow, silver handwriting across the pane. Teach me, she said. What? How to stand beside you so they can't move me. He reached for her hand, not taking it, only offering the outline of where it could rest. She placed her palm in his. He turned it gently, pressed his thumb to the center. Anchor points, he said. Palm, breath, eyes. If you lose one, find the other 2. And me. And you, she repeated. They slept a few hours on opposite sides of the same world. Morning arrived like a held breath finally let go. The rain had grown serious. The city wore it like a shawl. Yuna dressed with deliberate hands. The mirror returned a woman who looked both softer and stronger than she felt. Jiho adjusted his tie, then stopped, then removed it and chose another with less steel in it. She watched the small act and felt something protective rise in her. The drive to the headquarters was short and quiet. Every traffic light a small trial they passed. The building was a column of glass and certainty. Inside, assistants moved like a school of fish, parting for them, heads dipping. A woman with calm eyes and a headset walked them to a side elevator with a key that made the doors obey. As they rose, Yuna's pulse found her throat again. Jiho noticed and placed 2 fingers at his own wrist like a joke that held their private language. She smiled despite herself. The boardroom doors were a darker kind of wood, the kind that remembers every touch. Inside, men in suits and a few women in sharper suits arranged themselves around a table that could have landed a plane. His uncle sat near the center, spine so straight it looked like an accusation. The hum of low conversation stopped in a neat wave when Jiho entered. I slid to Yuna with interest that had teeth. Jiho did not clear his throat. He did not ask permission. He pulled out a chair for Yuna first, a simple, unshowy thing that shifted the air by a degree, and then took the seat beside her. He placed his phone face down and folded his hands as if he trusted them. His uncle laced his fingers as if about to pray and then decided against it. We brought the vote forward, the uncle said, each word polished. To protect the company. You brought it forward, Jiho corrected. To protect an arrangement that benefits you. A faint flash of teeth. Language is so flexible. Numbers are not, Jiho said. Which is why we're here. A man at the end of the table cleared his throat. Before we begin, the board would appreciate clarity on personal rumors. Jiho did not look at Yuna. He did not need to. There is nothing to clarify, he said. She is with me. That is enough for rumor and irrelevant to the vote. Irrelevant? His uncle repeated softly, like tasting something too sweet. Investors notice everything. Then let them notice that I still build companies while you build narratives, Jiho said. We are voting on a motion that gives away control under the pretense of stability. I refuse. You refuse. The uncle's eyebrows traveled the smallest distance. You do not have the votes. Today I do, Jiho said. The room adjusted. He placed a folder on the table like an offering. Inside it were documents that had moved in the dark while the city slept. Allies who had been paid to forget suddenly remembered loyalty when he called in debts of gratitude his father never noticed. 2 signatures swung a hinge. The numbers arranged themselves on his side. His uncle read and did not blink for 3 counts. Yuna watched the color of the morning change in the windows. The vote felt anticlimactic only because victory often does when it's earned in increments. Raised hands. Recorded eyes. The motion failed. Attention like a wire went slack, and a danger like a storm stepped back to the horizon. Jiho exhaled, but the room did not soften. Control lost does not leave quietly. His uncle stood with the elegance of a knife leaving its sheath. You may win a morning, he said, but you will pay for the afternoon. Send me the bill, Jiho said. Something in the uncle's eyes accepted the war had just shifted theaters. He turned to Yuna then, and the interest there had cooled into a curiosity that could freeze a river. And you? He said as if she were an object that had appeared on his table. What are you? Yuna did not answer the question as asked. She had learned from watching Jiho that rephrasing is a kind of defense. I am someone who will be fine whether or not you approve, she said. Her voice did not shake. She looked at Jiho because that was one of her anchor points. He was already looking back. The world held. They left before anyone could try to tie more ropes to their wrists. The corridor outside the boardroom felt like a different country. Voices sounded softer here, or maybe that was just blood leaving her ears. When the elevator doors closed, Yuna laughed once. A small burst of disbelief that tasted like relief. You were right, she said. You move weather. I read it, he corrected, and then let himself smile. And sometimes I choose rain. It was still falling when they stepped onto the private terrace that overlooked a gray, obedient city. The terrace had a small awning where the rain gathered and turned itself into a glittering curtain at the edge. They stood under it like 2 people and not like headlines. No cameras found them here. No voices that called them by the names they refused followed. He turned toward her as if the air had suggested it. You can walk away now, he said. Contract fulfilled. You bought time for me. I bought breath for you. Did we only buy those things? She asked, quiet. Or did we choose something? He hesitated, not from doubt but from the weight of naming. I chose you when I stopped this morning from becoming my father's afternoon. She stepped closer, small increments the body notices more than the eye. The rain softened just then, as if it wanted to hear better. I chose you when I got into the car, she said, and again when I stood beside you, and again when I said I wouldn't leave. His hand found her wrist the way it had in the cabin, counting a pulse, confirming life. He lifted her hand and placed it over his chest where a suit cannot hide anything if someone knows where to look. His heartbeat was fast in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Check the climate, he said, barely smiling. Warming trend, she answered, and the laugh they shared broke something old in both of them. He lowered his head without hurry, the way a man approaches a truth he intends to keep. She met him there. The kiss found them cleanly, without performance, and it felt less like fireworks than like a door opening into a room where the light had been on all along. The rain threaded silver strings around them. The city pretended not to watch. When they parted, her forehead rested against his for a second, and that second felt like an entire version of the life they had not known to wish for last night. We can end the contract, he said, breath softer than before. We can start something else, she said. Without signatures, he said. With choices, she said. He kissed her again. Quick this time, like punctuation. Later, in a quieter part of the day that still belonged to them, they drafted a statement the way two people who respect language draft one. Without lies. It did not declare forever. It did not apologize for beginnings. It simply said they were deciding their lives themselves and would not be answering questions for a while. The world would not love that, but love is rarely a committee's favorite word. In the evening, Yuna returned to the ward for a few hours because life insists on being life. She held the hand of a grandmother who hated needles and told a boy that sometimes the bravest thing is to sleep. When she stepped back into the night, the rain had gentled into a mist that felt like mercy. Jiho waited with an umbrella, an ordinary one from a convenience store, black and slightly imperfect. He lifted it and she stepped under, and for the length of a crosswalk they were two silhouettes in a small moving circle of shelter. "Dinner?" he asked. "Instant noodles," she said. "At your museum." "It's a home," he said, and didn't realize until he did. They walked. The city gleamed like a secret told to those willing to listen. Above them, the weather changed the way hearts do. Slowly, then all at once, then into something steady they could live with.